Right, it's going to be a little material project to try and create a leatherette effect material. I've just got the infinite plane, I'm pointing the camera straight down at it. There's no fancy sky effects, it's just the default Bryce sky. And I'm going to go into the material lab, and then this is in the default grey material. I'll put a blob in the first channel, diffuse channel, and then if I hold shift and click on the name, I can draw up the basic texture library here. And I'll just make an arbitrary choice for starting with, so I'll start with red fractal, and that's world space mapped, which is, you know, the type of mapping I was going to choose for this anyway. And I'll go into the deep texture editor. Now the controls here will open these dialogues, which then allows me to open this noise dialog, and what I'm looking for is something that's going to create the leatherette finish effect. And I've pondered this and had an experiment, and it's got to be something like one of these. So I'll start with this one, and then you can see that there's nothing in here at the moment. So it's 3D, which is another thing. I wanted it to be 3D, and I'm going to reset the clip filter so we can see something. Now if I take the octaves up, it'll increase the complexity of it, which is going to be quite a complex material. I'll try the maximum at the moment. I can always turn it down if it looks like it's running too slow, and then modify the clip filter, and I can adjust the frequency so we can see what's going on here. So this isn't very leathery coloured materials, so I'm going to pick some colours out for this, so I'll just check out of that. So sort of like a dark grey, light greys, something like that. And if I increase the frequency, you can see that what the pattern's like. So lowering the octaves, the frequency goes up. When you increase an octave, it introduces a half frequency pattern to recombine with itself. So we've got these combinational methods that all change the characteristics, but I'll start with standard first. Now I can also see, I've just noticed now there's a phase component. I don't want any phase at the moment, at least, so I'm going to leave that out and see what that looks like when it's rendered. So a bit patchy, might be heading in the right direction. I'm going to introduce some bump, so it's now got some bump to give it a bit of character. Specularity, because it's a leathery material, has that sort of property. I put the specular under the control of the same colour channel as well. I'm going to increase the specular halo. I'll try 240 so it spreads it out a bit more, because we're looking for that slightly glossy appearance. If I started adding reflection, it might really slow things down, so we'll just stick with an easy effect there. Possibly anisotropic as well. So we'll just see how those few changes have made to the characteristic. That's changed its appearance quite dramatically there. So it's looking a bit like something now. I'm not sure what, but it's looking like something. I think the frequency needs to be higher. So maybe sharpen that so that the crevices in the surface of the material are a bit sharper. So at the moment there's still got broad featureless areas, and that's not quite what I'm looking for. So what I can do now is combine it with its own self here. I'll make that an average, and then change this first channel. I'll change the filter into sine, reset that, and that gives me a more crumpled, so that the broad flat areas have also got some crumpling. And if I increase the sine, I can double its frequency, so that increases the complexity of the crumpling. If I want to preview this square on its own, even though it's not got the lighting that's in the render scene, I can hold the Alt key down and click on it. But there is a slight risk when doing that it might crash Bryce. It's something that's a bit unstable with. So right, that's improved things, because it's added a bit of surface detail in between the broader cracks. Because in the leather you have, it's like skin, it's got large sort of sections of print. I know this pattern's not quite right for that, but I couldn't think of anything else that was going to do it. And then it's got more surface detail there. We'll see if we can make those cracks a bit more defined then. We'll reintroduce the cracks, and average again. So that'll now reduce the effect of that crumpliness because it's doubled the crack selection here, and then I'm going to narrow them still further and then widen them here, so it'll create a sort of a sharper trough there. So those will be the sharpest troughs, and we'll have a look how that looks now. So that's made the bumpiness I introduced with the sine wave and the bump pattern less pronounced. So perhaps I've gone too far there, I don't know. I've always got the option of using different blend modes to see what effect it has. Rather than just describe them, I'll think about it too much. I just try them out and see how it looks. Blend minimum, not much happening there. That looks quite bumpy. So I don't know whether I really wanted that final averaging. And indeed, this Veroni procedural is quite slow to render, so, and I've chosen 8 octaves, which makes it even slower, so it might be a better idea to leave that channel empty for the time being and see if we really need that. So I'll take a step back from that, revert to this, and then consider what's going to happen with this material. I think what I'm going to have to do, I'll increase the frequency of it a bit. I'll get a sort of broader view of it and see how that looks. Okay, right, the edges are looking a bit bright possibly, so I might change the characteristics of the specularity. Well, one trick you can do is if I take this and I'll have to put it somewhere, I'll add it here. So I've saved my texture. It's like this Camtasia Studio is just interfering a bit, and then I move that one into the anisotropic. So I can control the anisotropic effect with the bump effect, because it sort of generates a normal map if you can trick Bryce into doing it. And the way to do that is I've got to set the frequency of this as the same, so it's following it. So if I take the first channel here and copy that value there so it's exactly scaled, so the patterns will line up now. They both need to be the same mapping mode, they both need to be scaled the same and no different offsets. And I go into the deep texture editor here and just switch everything off except the bump. You'll see it generates this sort of normal map here, and anisotropic is controlled by a vector which is controlled by colour, and so I can place this under the control of these colours by switching this into the bump now, and that'll trigger it to read the colours off there for the anisotropic effect. It's a little bit unstable, this effect, but it's nice when it works, so actually bringing a different quality to the anisotropic effect here and pick up more upon the big bump pattern. And the only thing is that to restore it when you reload the scene, you have to go into the material where you've got the pattern saved and then exit again, just check out of it and it'll restore it. So for example, if I was to save this, so I just save that now, right, and you look here at the area, because this is part of the anisotropic effect that's creating this effect, and then I reload this scene. I'll just find where I've dropped it now. Yeah, you can see already, see I'm just rendering that bit that it's changed. It's changed the characteristics of the anisotropic, it's lost a lot of its detail, but to restore it, go into the material lab and exit, and then it'll restore that effect. So now, well, it's not ideal, but I think that's a pretty close approximation for what I was aiming for. I'm sure that you could do further tweaking. Obviously, it's always the case when working with these materials. The image I was looking at to work for was somewhat like that, and I just couldn't get these lines to follow. This is obviously a bit more of a broken pattern, so close but no cigar. Right, I'll just see how it looks mapped onto a sphere, so I'll just create a sphere in this scene and then select the plane and select the sphere, go into the material lab, exit, and then we'll have a look. I'll change the position of the camera so we can get a look at this on a sphere and see how that looks. Okay, so there you go, a short material project video making a leatherette effect in Bryce 7.1 Pro. I hope that you enjoyed that, and that I'd encourage you to utilise the Material Lab and the Deep Texture Editor to see all the wonderful things that you can create with it, just purely modifying materials.